So as a quick refresher for everyone, the reason we're not going 50 minutes on each team is because one, free agency is almost here and this is going to be dated as fuck. We will do longer, extensive deep dives into each team after free agency. We just want to get a feel for what's going on for every team. So these will be aimed to be 10 minutes or less on each squad, just like we've done in the previous Lookaheads. I will go into alphabetical order, which is always a risky proposition because I am known to get the alphabet wrong. And the first team up in the Atlantic Division alphabetically is the New York. I'm just kidding. It is the Boston Celtics. Bryan Toporek's favorite team.
Yes.
And I go through their, as for anyone who's doing this first time, I'll run through their vitals really quickly. Notable non-guarantees. There's Al Horford at $19.5 million of his $26.5 million is guaranteed. I imagine they're going to guarantee that. That would be shocking. That's really the only one that matters. There's Juwan Morgan has a team option, and then Nick Stauskas. Notable extension candidates. Jaylen Brown is extension eligible. And notable trade exceptions, they have that Evan Fournier one. It's $17.1 million. It expires on July 18th. They have a Juan Hernangomez one at $6.9 million, which expires January 19th. And then the Dennis Schroeder one at $5.9 million, which expires February 10th. They also have a Romeo Langford one for $3.8 million that expires February 10th. So they have a lot of like options with their trade exceptions. Their best spending tool, if they choose to use it, will be the mini MLE. It'll take too much for them to duck the luxury tax apron. And so, Bryan, just heading in for Boston, like what are the general things you're thinking about, needs, questions, priorities, or whatever, and how they should approach?
Yeah, I mean, the conversation after the run to the finals was, do they need a point guard, even though they got 2 wins away from winning the finals with Marcus Smart as their point guard? But I guess that will be one area of need in mind. Otherwise, like, they're of any team in this division, they're feeling pretty good about themselves. Like, they don't have a ton of major decisions to make this offseason. It's like, who do we spend the taxpayer mid-level on? And then otherwise, we're just going to basically run it back with this same core. Most of our guys are young enough that you can reasonably expect internal improvement to carry them even further. Like, I think that the biggest question is, like, does Jaylen Brown develop more of a ball handling this summer, or does Jason Tatum continue to refine his shot selection this summer? Can Robert Williams stay healthy and rehab that knee this summer so he can make it, unscathed through a playoff run next year? Like, those are all far more important than, like, who do they spend $6 million on?
For sure. And I saw people say the point guard criticism was overblown. I actually didn't think it was overblown. I think the interpretation of it was exaggerated. No, anyone who's thinking they need to go out and try to trade for like Chris Paul, no, that's not what they need. And as people pointed out, like I mentioned, this name is too ambitious given the market, like a Tyus Jones. They need someone on that level. And it doesn't matter if he wouldn't play in crunch time, because the first like 43 to 46 minutes of the game matter anyway. And you put yourself in a position where if you can take care of your possessions in a more efficient fashion, let's just say, where you're not letting the shot clock run all the time, where you're not committing all these turnovers, someone who's just more of a game manager. I think Marcus Smart and Jason Tatum are fantastic passers, especially Tatum now at this point, but it feels like they need a game manager. And it's not something, you don't even need to go nuclear. Although, like, they can't even get Mike Conley because you have to give up one of your core guys for it. But I do think even a point guard you could play through like the first 3.5 quarters would go a long way for them if they can help just delineate touches. The other thing that stands out, and like their shooting percentages are okay, they need someone who feels like a knockdown shooter that's not a star. Like, it's not Jason Tatum's off the dribble threes or Jaylen Brown's spot up attempts. Like, they need, and you can't bank on Marcus Smart to like get super hot. And he's improved his shooting a lot over the past 2 to 3 seasons. It just felt like and you want to be able to play that player in higher leverage moments where some people might say, well, that could be Peyton Pritchard, or maybe we're still hoping for Aaron Nesmith to be that. She's like, well, those guys probably aren't playing when it matters. And I think just in general, they just need an 8th guy. Like, their top 7, it's like they're really good. So if you find an 8th guy, again, maybe he's not playing in the high leverage moments, but if you're just extending your rotation that much, especially to the point when you get in the playoffs where there's just 8 guys you could rely on, do I think that's out there for the mini MLE? They're appealing enough to where if the money's equal, I would assume teams would choose them. But I'm looking at these trade exceptions, man. Like, the Evan Fournier one is massive, and they have like a bunch of medium-sized ones. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that they could make an impact move without trading one of their core guys. Like Derek White is sort of my cutoff. Like, you're not trading. I'm sure you would trade Horford in the right deal. I don't think, Tatum and Tatum's as untouchable as it gets, but like you don't need to move a Smart or a Robert Williams or a Horford or a White.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you look at the market outside of the top few guys, especially at guard, is just pretty barren. Unless, I mean, who knows? Kyrie Irving, who we'll talk about shortly, maybe he wants a Boston reunion at a $30 million discount. Because a point guard and a high leverage shooter can't do much better than Kyrie on the market. Assuming that is off the table, Tyus Jones is a great shout. I mean, like Ricky Rubio would be that table setting point guard, but he's not the shooter that you want. I guess if Patty Mills opts out, that's a possibility. Like if that's just completely crater.
My guess is he's not like Tyus Jones. I don't know if he gets as much as Tyus Jones. My guess is he'll be too expensive. But DeLon Wright?
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if like Smart, Wright, and White are all just kind of duplicative or triplicative, if
really
that's
fair.
a word. Yeah, like Dante DiVincenzo, I don't think you're going to pry out of Sacramento for $6 million because he's restricted. Like they would hopefully.
I like that you mentioned Rubio feels like the right answer because I imagine he's not going for more than the mini MLE when he's probably not playing for at least half the season. Doesn't give you the shooting, but again, someone who can be I'm not trying to be condescending when I put it this way, but the adult in the room on offense. When you like in the half court, like it feels like that's what they need. And if you're banking on Tatum and Smart to just make leaps and maybe even Brown there a little bit, that's fine. Maybe even White a little bit. But I would like to see them try and address it. Do any other free agent targets or even trade targets spring to mind to you that would be good fits for this team?
Yeah, you mentioned knockdown shooter, so I immediately think Malik Monk, if he's willing to settle because I mean, he went ring chasing last year for a minimum. So if he can get even some portion of the taxpayer mid-level or the whole thing, that wouldn't help really with the ball handling, but he would be that, come flying around the screens type of shooter. Trade target, Nuggets fans are going to hate me because they are living
I know where you're going because I was
perpetual fear. Yeah, but Monte Morris, if they are really serious about just trimming salary, trying to duck the tax, like the problem is I don't know what Boston sends back. Like, is a future first enough for Monte Morris, or do you have to send like Pritchard or Nesmith back? But I mean that's probably the best fit / target they could acquire realistically.
I would do that in a heartbeat too. And I don't think the Nuggets should do it, but it does seem it's going to be like him or Will Barton because they're dead set on ducking attacks. And it probably makes more sense to be Will Barton just because Monte's more valuable to them at this point, but also his salary is bigger to where you basically have to dump Monte Morris just to duck the taxes as of this moment. And so there's more wiggle room with Barton's salary if you wanted to take back a player like Pritchard or somebody. But yeah, Monte Morris on the Celtics would be spectacular.
Yeah. I mean, again, like the Boston right now, if they aren't the team to beat in the East, looking across the landscape, like Milwaukee will be back next year, Miami will be back. Who knows about Brooklyn? But like they can feel pretty good about where they are, so they don't need to make any drastic moves this offseason, I would say. But yeah, if they wiggle their way into Monte Morris, I'm just gonna be miserable for a week.
Would Devontae Graham help this team at all?
Ooh, that's interesting. I mean,
you can say no because the look on your face insinuates.
No, I mean, like, yes. I don't know how much he moves their ceiling higher, but adding another good rotation player certainly wouldn't hurt. And if you're not giving up a ton to do it or anything of real value, like you've got the trade exception, he fits in there. Again, are you giving up Nesmith or Pritchard? Or are you giving up a future first? Like, I don't think New Orleans can realistically ask for, like a huge return on him. So that's an interesting call. I like that.
I have at least one more name for you, and I'm less excited about it. And it also I don't know why it just vacated my mind too. Oh, here it is. He would have to not be what he was this past season, but Cameron Payne.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's the question, right? And I guess we'll see what happens with Phoenix. Like if they let Ayton go and, some of those guys start to get a little nervous and they're looking around, they're like, ooh, this is not the situation we signed up for here. We thought we were re-signing with the title favorite. So I think it would more be like Cameron Payne might need to like ask for a trade because again, you're probably not getting a ton back for him. So I mean,
I would think that you would just offload him if the Celtics were willing to use a trade exception, would be my
Yeah.
thought at this point.
Yeah. Because I mean, well, who knows who's going to even own the team in 3 months? But the current owner is
Good point.
certainly notoriously cheap.
I have two names from the same team.
Okay.
They're looking. We know they have to dump other salary, and we'll get to that in a second. But Derrick Rose feels like he might. I'm talking about knockdown shooting. I'm just naming all these point guards that aren't knockdown shooters.
Sure.
And then
he's
this
at least better.
Right. This guy's not a point guard, and he's coming off foot surgery now. But Alec Burks, it's like someone else who fit. Like, I mean, so many players fit into their trade exceptions at this point. Let's be honest.
I mean, that's the luxury. Like, I don't know if they're going to end up using it or using the whole thing because they're already over the tax line. And like, I always say, like, the line of demarcation is like 15 to 20 million over. Like, if you're under that, the bill isn't like exorbitantly expensive. But once you get into like the 15 to 20 range, it starts piling up pretty quickly. So I would be surprised if they take like a full $17 million salary back, but neither of the guys you mentioned. I guess Derrick Rose is close, but like Burks is what, like 10, 11 million, somewhere around there?
Yeah, he's in there. So I had thought too, it turns out he makes too much. I didn't realize he was getting paid this much next season, but if they were trying to pay Brunson and didn't want to pay Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie, I thought he fit into the Evan Fournier trade exception. I can confirm that he makes $2.5 million more than the Evan Fournier trade exception.
Oof. Wow. How much of that is in Bitcoin?
I mean, I would imagine all of it at this point,
right? So maybe does it count? Like, because it lost 50% of the value, so maybe he's only earning 10 million now.
Yeah, I don't have this team is. I guess I would say decidedly uninteresting because they are so good, and we don't think they need to make any other changes. Do you see them offering an extension, or would you offer an extension to Jaylen Brown this summer?
Yes, I mean,
do you think?
I don't think he takes it.
Right. I kind of thought though, like once you get into the 20% raise from where he's at, it's not that egregious for him to take it. Like, I guess if the thought is if he went on the market tomorrow, he would just get, or the whatever year, he's just going to get the full boat. Like it'll be a full max. So they should absolutely offer it on the off chance that he signs it though.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm any agent right now, I'm telling my clients, do not take an extension before the new CBA kicks in because we want to see what happens there in case they make any changes, especially to the Supermax, like, because the current Supermax just didn't work as intended. And then also like the new TV deals kick in 25, 26. So I would try to be a free agent.
Free agency the year before the TV deal kicks in.
Like a 1+1.
Right. It's just, is he the type, like, would you, I mean, that's so far down the line, but he was the only real, like, extension candidate on this team that matters. Though I say that, and Grant Williams is extension eligible as well, too.
Yeah.
And he was pretty important to them during points of the playoffs. Not so much the finals, but.
Yeah. Mort and I were trying to figure out, like, what a reasonable extension is for him. And I think we landed at, like, 12 to 14 million is as high as we would go.
I feel like that's right. And 14 might even be on the higher end because he doesn't feel like I'll say an every series player. I think you can play him all the time in the regular season, but he doesn't feel like an every series player.
Right. Yeah. Our whole thing was like, what do they project him as long term? Like, is he going to take over as their starting power forward once Horford ages out / leaves and play next to Robert Williams? Or do you see him as this like energy guy off the bench all the time? In which case you're probably less willing to pay him 8 figures annually.
No, I'd agree with you there. So I don't actually expect him or Jaylen Brown to get an extension.
Yeah, I think they will certainly try to offer it to Jaylen, and I think he will, hopefully with the guidance of his agent, he will look at the wider picture and say, no, thank you. I would like my full amount of money because he took less than the max on his current deal. So it's time to get Jaylen paid for real.
Final question on them very, very quickly. What's more likely? They use one of their trade exceptions that are worth more than the mini MLE, or they don't use their mini MLE. Just like maybe they're tax conscious and it's like, oh, we're not, they decide to be the Nuggets East. Like we're not going to spend our taxpayer MLE.
God, for their sake, I mean, I hate them, so I hope that's the case, but for their sake, I hope they use it because they, again, we're 2 wins away from the finals. This is not the time, or 2 wins away from winning the finals.
Right.
This is not the time to get cheap. So I think it is more likely that they use their trade exception and really just go all in on this thing than cheap out.
Which is also just what I would do if I was Brad Stevens. The next team, this should be fun. the Brooklyn Nets. Their key free agents include Kyrie Irving with his player option, Bruce Brown, free agent. They have full bird rights on him. Nick Claxton, restricted, full bird. Patty Mills has a player option. He would be non-bird. And then LaMarcus Aldridge, sneakily, I almost forgot that he played for them in the previous season. So he's early bird. And then they have Blake Griffin, Goran Dragic, Andre Drummond. Those guys are all non-bird free agents. They have Kessler Edwards has a team option. I assume they will exercise that. If they don't, that would just be a bow on top of what's already been a ridiculous offseason. Their most notable trade exceptions, they have $3.2 million left over from Spencer Dinwiddie. Expires on July 7th. The DeAndre Jordan trade, $6.3 million. That expires August 19th. And then they have a trade, a TPE from the James Harden trade. It's worth $11.3 million, and that expires on February 10th. Their best spending tool is the mini MLE. And look, we could go through their needs, which I think needs to be like wings and two-way players in general. But like the Kyrie Irving situation, like what is the most likely outcome to this? And I will say, I think it was Kevin O'Connor was on a podcast with Logan Murdoch, and I'm summarizing here. He said that KD's frustrated with the front office because they haven't gone to enough lengths to understand Kyrie. Now, I think the Nets are very culpable in everything that's happened. I think them personally trying to grow a backbone all of a sudden is hysterical because you handed your franchise over in 2019. And what, like, it's too late. If you let Kyrie go, you're losing Kevin Durant. But like, what else are they supposed to do? They've literally given the keys to you and Kyrie.
It's all just hilarious to me because there's been like a weird rivalry between Nets folks and Sixers folks ever since the Harden trade went down, and I think we're like rooting for each other's respective demise. And frankly, it's probably going to happen to both teams, but I figured it would happen to Philly before Brooklyn, not the other way around. Like, I can't blame Brooklyn for not wanting to go like 5-year fully guaranteed max on Kyrie, given just everything surrounding him. I also can't blame Kyrie for not wanting to take a short-term prove-it deal, or like if they're trying to get him to pick up his option and say like, all right, prove we can rely on you this year and we'll give you the full amount of money next year. Because all it takes is one injury and he just loses, could be hundreds of millions of dollars. Like it felt like bluffing for a while. I don't think it's bluffing anymore. Like it does not. I don't know. I mean, I would think if cooler heads would prevail, they'll do something like what's probably going to happen with James Harden, where Harden's sake, he's going to opt in and take a short-term extension because him opting in, he can actually earn more money than he could as a free agent. I think Kyrie, it makes sense for him financially to opt out and then take maybe like a 2+1 deal.
That would get him. I was going to mention that gets him into free agency when the TV money is supposed to hit again.
Right. And he's young enough still that he could. I don't know if he's going to max at that age, but like the starting contract is going to be like $40 million for anyone with.
That'll be the mid-level, right?
Yeah, at this point. But I don't know, man. Like the more we hear this, and like I feel like Woj and Shams don't report stuff unless there's some real smoke behind it. And for both of them to be like hinting at, well, now Kevin Durant's thinking about his future too. You wrote a great column at BR when all of this started like a month ago, I think, when it was Christian Winfield of the New York Daily News who first reported like.
Which people, by the way, shout out to Christian, because people are like, oh, why do you think that you know all this? There's no way Kevin Durant hasn't talked to the front office. And now other people are coming out and saying the same thing. So shout out to Christian Winfield of the New York Daily News.
Yeah, and you were writing like if they do this with Kyrie, they're at risk of losing KD as well, which now seems to be the reality. So like I still don't buy the whole like Kyrie's going to opt out and take 30 million less and play for the Lakers on the mini MLE. Like that, I never say never.
15+ million in salary this past year.
I know, but like then they wouldn't have non-bird on him next year either. I guess Russ would be coming off their books.
But when I've gone on shows and they've asked me about it, or I've seen people talk about it, like, oh, they'll just sign him. And it's like, no, if he wants the actual deal, they'll be flexible next summer, technically, if LeBron doesn't sign anything. But you have to pay LeBron. So it's like, if you really want to be able to pay Kyrie, like this is a 3-year thing that he's agreeing to so that you can gain his full bird rights, unless, again, he's opting in and being traded.
Right. Yeah. So I think I'm going to write a column about it, or I'm like in the midst of writing a column about it. I think that the most logical option, if Kyrie really does want out, pick up the option, as a condition of like work with me on an opt in and trade. And if the Knicks say no, you lock in $37 million. You can make their lives hell for a year, and then you can bounce next summer.
That's a good point. I expect it to be like a 2+1 outcome. If not, if you're asking me to pick who breaks first, I think it will be the Nets, because this is almost like the Clippers situation where it's like you're not trading. It's the inverse of it. You're not trading for Paul George. You're trading for Paul George and Kawhi,
Right.
and you're not just getting rid of Kyrie. You'd be getting rid of Kyrie and KD. I'd be fascinated by the the KD trade talks.
Yeah.
I find it funny that Dame is tweeting out a picture. When players do this, by the way, people were mad at me because I made a joke about it on Twitter. I am all for this. I do wonder how like that player's teammates feel that know they would probably be involved in such a Kevin Durant. Like Shaden Sharp, after Dame apparently wanted to, and he's tweeting out like, more interestingly though, like people have mentioned the Suns, the team that I was wondering if they could get involved in it. And I think my answer is no. But if you're the Nets, you're rebuilding if you're trading Kevin Durant at that point. Can the Bucks use as a primary anchor like Chris Middleton to suss in or attract other teams that might send stuff back to the Nets? And look, if I'm Kevin Durant, I want to play in Milwaukee because Giannis Antetokounmpo is fucking spectacular. But the Nets also don't have to trade Kevin. Like at that point, your reputation's already damaged enough. Like send Kevin Durant wherever the hell you want at that point.
Yeah.
But I don't know if Milwaukee could feasibly. It would take a team really wanting Chris Middleton, of course.
Yeah, I have not put too much thought into like Kevin Durant trade scenarios, and I'm sure someone will at BR at some point this week. So God bless whoever has to write that article. I've seen people talk about Toronto as they could at least cobble together an interesting offer.
Toronto would be Toronto and Phoenix and Milwaukee were like my three favorites. Actually, I'd love him in Denver too. Imagine KD and
you get like, man, but you're right. Like, is Brooklyn taking back Michael Porter Jr. given the back issues as the main return for Kevin freaking Durant?
No, I think you'd probably have to give Jamal Murray might be the more likely, and he's coming off an ACL injury. It'd be Jamal Murray and Bones Highland, and then every single pick that you can offer, which is not many because you flipped I think they can only trade a 2029 pick because didn't they just trade the 2027 one? Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah. And that's going to be the problem with a lot of these contenders is that like a lot of teams are now very restricted in which picks they can offer. I get New Orleans would be interesting because they have some of the Lakers picks left still and pick swaps. Like if things go south with Zion Williams, I know he's like supposed to sign a max extension, but if he does not, or if things go south in those negotiations, can you
Would you trade Zion for Kevin Durant for the Pelicans right now?
Yes.
You would?
Yes.
I don't know that I would do it.
Really?
Can we pretend that Kevin Durant hasn't had his own health issues the past 3 years?
Sure, but I would do it. I would absolutely do it.
All right. But Zion Williamson and stuff though, like that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean it would have to be whatever filler you need. So if it's like Zion and BI and like 6 picks, no. But if it's like Zion and Devontae Graham and whatever else, like I don't know. I guess they would have to throw in Valanciunas probably.
I feel like this is going to be a futile exercise because, like we said, we both expect Kyrie back. What are your biggest needs for assuming Kyrie Irving? Let's just assume Kyrie's back because the whole calculus for that's future changes if he's not. Right. What are you looking at for this team to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think they need to hell with the luxury tax. You've got to bring back, ideally, both Brown and Claxton because I think both are super important both for their short and long-term futures. Like if you are concerned with things going south, like even if you could re-sign Kyrie and you get him on a 2+1, like there's no guarantee this all doesn't come to a head next summer. So I think you need to be planning ahead as well and trying to keep your good young players. I mean, they've only got assuming Kyrie comes back, they have 8 players under contract right now. So they just need to fill out their roster with warm bodies. I agree with you. Wings are going to be super important, just like for every other team.
Do they even have a wing, right? There's the candidates are Kevin Durant, which, okay, fine. If you like Kevin Durant the wing, if you want to say he's more of like a combo forward, like however you want to define it, there's Kevin Durant, Then there's Joe Harris, Bruce Brown. I know Roto World's depth chart has Ben Simmons listed at the 3. It's like that's what
Oh,
this team is
sure.
because Kyrie's there, obviously, but like Ben Simmons isn't a wing. Bruce Brown's
No.
not. You can defend him, but he's not a wing. Like he's not used like a wing on offense. They need that like I don't, and those are available in scant supply to begin with entering this offseason. But with the mini MLE, that's going to be tough to get. But they just need wings.
Yeah. I mean, what's wild about them is that if they smooth things out with Kyrie, which is a big if at this point, you tried out Kevin Durant, Kyrie, Ben Simmons, and any combination of Joe Harris, Seth Curry, Patty Mills, Bruce Brown next season. And those lineups are going to cook. Like, I get why the Nets are one of the title favorites right now, but I would not, in my wildest dreams, bet on them, especially given what's happened over the last week, because I just feel like something is going to go wrong. I don't know what, I don't know when, but I just can't see this sticking together through next June enough for them to win a title.
Some of the names that sprung to mind for me that I think they could afford and would fit. And look, they could also use some let's assume they bring back Claxton. They still sort of need like front line certainty where is it Claxton and Day'Ron Sharp, and please don't let it be Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge.
Right.
And
right.
again, I don't know if do you think they can even bring back Andre Drummond? Like, is
No,
his market beyond?
He said, remember he got traded there, and it was like, I'm here. It's just a rental. They can't afford me.
I mean, do you think he's getting more than the mini MLE?
But no, probably
I don't think
not.
the Nets should be the one team that's spending that, though. That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they have to just round out their roster, and I think the competition for wings is going to be more competitive than for bigs. Like, I think you can find a reasonable big on a min deal. So I think they probably, if they lose Drummond, maybe they're the next stop on the Dwight Howard redemption tour, or like JaVale McGee, Hassan Whiteside, Dwayne Dedman. Like, none of these names are super sexy, but
I mean, Dwayne Dedman would be great for them.
Yeah. So I think they probably spend the MLE on a wing and just go cheap with the third veteran big.
Some of the names that spring to mind for me, and I think most of these I would consider below mini MLE, except for the first one, which is Gary Harris. I don't know what he commands, but he would be great for them. Looking at, they could use either of the Martin brothers. I've said this for a few teams now, and I'm not looping them together, but they both have the same sort of positional flexibility on defense. Daniel House would be good. And look, they need multiple wings, and so you probably need to hit on some minimums. So it's like, are they a team that needs to enter Rodney Hood territory? Abdel Nader? Ooh. Those are names that they probably need to look at. Someone should take a look at PJ Dozier, depending on how healthy he is coming off of that ACL injury. I understand any Nets fans who are listening that these are not sexy names, and I wouldn't spend, like I said, the mini MLE on both of them, but you have to also look beyond the mini MLE. If you could get Gary Harris, or even, what is TJ Warren going to get? I assume if it only takes the mini MLE, like Indiana will just re-sign him, and I assume he would probably want as much money as he could get, but who knows? He would play like a wing who can defend one-on-one in Brooklyn. Like, they will play a lot.
Yeah. I have been running through, I put non-taxpayer up on Saturday, and I'm doing taxpayer tomorrow. So these are Sixers specific targets, but you named a lot of the guys that I had in mind, because I think the Sixers' biggest need is wings. So if we're talking wings, Otto Porter Jr. is another one. I would assume, because if like the Warriors are willing to give him the mini MLE, he's probably just staying there. But if not, like if their tax bill is just like, okay, we can only go so far before we're just like, we cannot spend this much money, and they have to re-sign Looney and Gary Payton as well. I think he probably does get at least full mini MLE. I mean, I love the Martin brothers. Gary Harris is a good one. House is the one, like, he's probably my number one guy. We'll get into Philly later, but like, I would think that he might not even get the full MLE, but I think he probably should. I don't know what Taurean Prince gets, because he's coming off a bigger contract, so maybe he gets more than the mini MLE, but like he
sometimes feels like the idea of Taurean Prince on defense is better than Taurean Prince in practice. Like the shooting, sure.
But like, if you've got Bruce Brown, Ben Simmons, and Claxton, I don't know that you need like.
That's the Ben Simmons part of this is tough, because it's like, I kind of forget he's there because we haven't seen him play in so long. And so, yeah, you have more defense than you did last season, noticeably so.
Right. Yeah. Well, do you have Ben Simmons? It's a fair point.
I don't think they'll use like their better trade exceptions, but like the Knicks, if they're really looking to dump Cam Reddish, why not take a flyer on him? He fits into, I think, two of their trade exceptions. He fits into the DeAndre one exactly, maybe. I can't remember where he just gets there. And they, of course, have the James Harden one if he's more expensive. I know that contenders don't normally think in those terms, but like I'm just getting I want wings. Like I don't care like young, old, as long as they can play and there's like some either untapped upside to them or they've proven something, just give Brooklyn all the wings.
Yeah. Cam Reddish should be, I mean, again, like I think the Nets really need to be mindful of the future here because they owe their next 5 picks either like fully unprotected, just going to Houston, or pick swaps to Houston. So if this thing really goes south, they could be sending some premium picks to Houston in like the mid 2020s.
I wonder, and I guess the first round equity that they could actually give up, maybe it's too expensive for this, but like Kenrich Williams, someone's got to get him out of OKC. Well, they don't have to. I'll make that clear. He's thrived in OKC. He also said he wanted to retire there. My point is, everyone should be looking to trade for Kenrich Williams. So if I don't mention him for a team, just assume that he's a trade target for that team.
I feel the same about Lou Dort too.
Do you? I'm like so much lower on Lou Dort than everybody else.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
I don't vibe with offense. Like there's like infrequent rim pressure and like spotty shooting, and he's a defensive monster. The best, I think it was David Brandon on Twitter described Lou Dort once as a big Mack truck made up of other miniature Mack trucks. I was like, that is perfect.
Yeah, I want that guy on my team.
We went over on the Nets because, of course, we're going to the New York Knicks now. Not any less dramatic. Key free agents include Mitchell Robinson. He's unrestricted, but they have full bird rights. And for anyone who cares, Ryan Arcidiacono is also a free agent. Their notable non-guarantees, Taj Gibson, his salary doesn't become guaranteed until January 7th, 2023, but they're going to waive him because we already know what they're doing at this point. Their notable extension candidates include RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish. They have no notable trade exceptions. Their best spending tool as of now, I'm just assuming they waive Taj Gibson. They're going to be in that $18 million cap space range. If they want more, that's where the Cam Reddish salary dumps come in. So their best spending tool is going to be cap space. They made that clear on draft night. I have listed as their biggest needs / priorities, and this is to jumpstart the larger conversation, is a fucking direction, is what I literally have. Before I throw it to you, I would just like to say, I received a lot of criticism for what I wrote and what I said after the Knicks trade stuff. If you like the idea of what they did in a vacuum, getting 3 conditional firsts for that 1 first, fine. Like I still would have, I liked Ousmane Dieng. I actually would have picked him. I also like Dokbashi. I thought he would have been a good fit. Fine. That's actually not what I'm criticizing. I'm not even technically criticizing that they definitely overpaid to salary dump Kemba Walker. And some people will say, well, if that's what it costs to salary dump Kemba Walker, they didn't overpay that. Fine, waive him. It was 1 season, and you're clearly not planning to operate like a salary cap team again anytime soon if you're making a run at Jalen Brunson. That $3 million a year, work around it, is where I would have been with that. My larger issue, and has nothing to do with Jalen Brunson. I promised everyone I've watched Jalen Brunson. I'm excited for the Knicks to go 2-0 against the Utah Jazz every single season. But this is like, he's not the player you pay $25 million when you don't have another star in place already.
Yep.
And that star probably needs to be on the higher end of stardom, because I don't know that you could feel comfortable saying, oh, Drew Holiday's my best player, Jalen Brunson can be my second best player. Like, it can't be someone on it has to be a top 10 guy like Luka. And that's where the criticism is they are consigning themselves to the middle again. I don't care how good Jalen Brunson ends up being, but awesome that you guys want to pay $40 million combined to Derrick Rose and Jalen Brunson next season. That's a hell of a smart thing to do. That's where my criticism is, though. I think Jalen Brunson is fantastic. I think there's something to be said for, yes, he will streamline the development of RJ Barrett on offense. And yes, you know what? Maybe he'll force Julius Randle to act more like a big and a spot-up guy rather than someone who has carte blanche over the offense. My issue is just that you're not at a point, especially after paying Randle and Fournier, where this is what you need to be doing and then jumping through so many hoops to do so. And the final thing I'll say, you can look at it, what they've cost to dump salary and create space so far. They are not done. If you dump Cam Reddish, like a lot of people think they will, and they haven't yet, to their credit, you will have turned the number 19 pick in the 2021 draft into another Charlotte pick that you turned into Cam Reddish, who you then use to create $6 million in cap space. That is poor asset allocation, no matter how you look at it. And it'd be different if the player at the end of this shit-stained rainbow was an actual star. It's not. It's Jalen Brunson, who is BT. Is Jalen Brunson a top 40 player?
I haven't thought long enough to go.
But like that's
Probably.
like these are not the hoops you jump through to get someone like that, unless is he the Knicks' finishing piece?
No.
Exactly. And you know what? If they don't get him now, this somehow it looks even worse, but it's funnier. So that's, I just wanted to clarify, that's what I'm meaning by a fucking direction. I'm not actually, if that's the trade they made with the pick, and I actually think the pick they gave up was at the Denver pick to get off Kemba, but you still got the Milwaukee pick. I'd rather have the Milwaukee 2025 pick. It's top 4 protected. Denver was protected until Kingdom Come, or was lottery protected. So that's, I wouldn't have done it because I think there's a chance Washington pick doesn't convey. I think there's less of a chance now that Detroit's pick doesn't convey. That team looks fun in the years to come. I can't even come up with free agent targets for this team outside of Jalen Brunson because I have no idea what the fuck they're doing.
What about Kyrie?
Is that like, if I will give the same criticism, hitching your wagon to Kyrie Irving is just like playing with dynamite now. Now people were in our YouTube comments saying, well, you probably were against them getting Kyrie in the first place and looked how well that turned out. You don't get to backtrack if they go ahead and get Kyrie. Do you know what the actual contingency plan is in place if they don't get Brunson? It's Malcolm fucking Brogdon. There is, it's not a likelihood, but there is a percentage chance, whatever it is, that this all ends with them just getting Malcolm Brogdon from the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm keeping my eye. Just if things go south with Kyrie and he opts out, like the teams on his sign and trade list are all well over the tax. So most of them are over the apron already or will be. So they can't receive a player in a sign and trade unless they get under. Miami's the one exception there, but I think Woj reported their interest is minimal. And
did you see what Mickey Harrison tweeted out the other day?
No.
It was, I can't, this is me summarizing again, but he tweeted out an article where it says proof that the unvaccinated are killing people. He tweeted that out on Saturday. So this is like post Kyrie rumors. Like he saw the rumors and he was like, no.
It's the one place in Florida where the unvaccinated are not welcome. Interesting. So if he opts out, like the Knicks are his only realistic option other than re-signing with Brooklyn. So it's just something that I'm going to the deadline is Wednesday for the opt-in, opt-out decision. Like if he opts out, I'm thinking like, oh, okay. Now the Knicks are in here. But otherwise, I completely agree with you. Like I'm still not sure. I mean, I think Barrett is the closest thing to it. But I still don't know if the Knicks have like anything resembling a star on a championship team.
They don't have a pull star cornerstone right now. I think it's not Julius Randle. I bought the Julius Randle contract year, extension year, whatever you want to call it. I bought into it. I still think he can be better than he was for most of last season. It's not him. I'm not willing to rule out RJ Barrett, but I do think at this point, like, it's not 50-50 that RJ Barrett is a top 10 player. Like it's not.
Right. Yeah. Like he could be a co-star or like a strong number 3 on a title team. But yeah, I would be surprised if he,
which is important.
Yeah, of course. Right. Like don't get me wrong. It's important to have good players and especially good young players. But like, I almost feels like if they get Brunson, and I mean, this is what it's felt like for the last couple seasons with them. They're like signing all of these guys to mid-tier deals. So it's like, okay, well, if we need, some star out there wants a trade, like, oh, we've got all these mid-sized contracts. We can easily cobble together something. And I guess now they added these 3 first-round picks. So like if Donovan Mitchell, if things go to hell in Utah and he wants out, maybe they're in on him. But otherwise, like, yeah, I guess what is the plan here? Like, are you going to cobble these together for, as you said, Malcolm Brogdon is like the backup plan, or like Mike Conley is the backup plan? I don't know. Like the plan sounds good in theory, but they have yet to execute on it like 3 years into this now.
Yeah. And I think stuff that I would like to see them do. Some people said, well, like you lined out, what if those picks, they're planning on running another star? If they go ahead and turn around and trade for DeJounte Murray or Mitchell becomes available, I'll eat my words. Like I'm willing to do that. And I would love to do that. I just don't think I will. they are in a position where they could get creative with what they're doing in free agency since they have cap space. And if Jalen Brunson does go back to Dallas, do you start shopping around the restricted free agent well? I don't think there's no one in this market that I think is worth them burning most of their cap space on at once. But can you look at like they're a team that could still use wings? Like I would love for them to take a flyer on like an Amir Coffee. I think they're a good landing spot for a Caleb or a Cody Martin. I think they also need shooting in general to just open things up if you want to play Mitchell Robinson and Julius Randle together at the same time. So can you go on the market and find some of that because now you have more money than more than 2/3 of the league to spend at this point. There aren't a ton of good shooters on the open market, but at the same time, like if Gary Harris wanted to come play for the Knicks, like that's someone who shot well enough from three this year, and so that's what I'd be looking to do is like kind of finding those glue guys. To where that could just space the floor. And I'd love to see them do that at the 5. But I think to wrap up the discussion here, they're going to wind up re-signing Mitchell Robinson. You have Jericho Sims there. You want to see what you have in Obi Toppin. I'm just sort of resigned to Tibbs probably wouldn't play a floor spacing big if it was at his disposal anyway. Maybe it's more likely that he's forced to try out Randall and Toppin, which I know will be a defensive disaster, but they need to open up the floor. And by the way, they need to do that even if Jalen Brunson comes to town because like he's used to operating with a lot more space in Dallas and the Knicks are going to give him next season if he signs there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, like Tyus Jones, you mentioned him earlier for Boston. Like if he is not willing to sell for the mid level and isn't even willing to sell for the non-taxpayer, like he wants 12, 14 million, he would be someone of interest for me. I don't get why Mo Bamba is like not generating any free agent interest, at least in terms of like the lead up to free agency.
His team is, or are they more likely? Like they still drafted Paolo Banchero, so like I don't think that makes them more or less likely to get rid of him. I just thought they were going to get rid of him when they ended up with the top 3 pick.
Right, and I would. Yeah, I mean, it seemed to be a lot of people are like expecting them not even to issue him a qualifying offer, which I mean, like, cool, I get it. Like, you've got Wendell Carter and now Paolo, like those are and you've got Jonathan Isaac coming back in theory at some point. But Bamba's good. Like, I feel like he's going to wind up signing for less than he should and being a huge steal in free agency. So if they lose Mitchell Robinson somehow, that would be another guy I'd be certainly after because like he's still raw, but the skill set and the upside is really intriguing, especially for a team that needs to be taking some home win swings on talent.
And look, if they don't use their cap space on like a big free agent, like they should absolutely be what teams are looking to dump contracts. If they're not getting Brunson, what are they attaching to it? And then, you are reloading your deck. Again, I still wouldn't love the order of operations because if you miss on Brunson, it means that you dumped Kemba. And I assume they're waiting for the other moves before, like to know that they have them. So it's tough to look ahead to the Knicks offseason because if you assume they get Brunson, like that's the move.
Right.
And then they could use the room exception after that. And it's awesome. Like, I don't know what that's going to be. I think their biggest position of need, while I'd like to see some sort of shape shifting up front, I really think it's like, can you get some actual properly sized wings in there? I mean, Cam Reddish adds to that if you're going to keep him. It doesn't sound like they're going to keep him, or we don't know if they're going to keep him, or if Tibbs even fucking likes him at this point.
Right. Will Tibbs play him at any point next year?
That was the other point about this trade too. It's like, well, Tibbs wasn't going to play a lottery prospect anyway. And it's like, Tom Thibodeau is not a good enough coach for you to think that way.
Right. Just fire your coach. If your coach is not willing to play a lottery pick, then he shouldn't be your coach.
And that was really my fundamental issue was like the moves in a vacuum. You can evaluate different ways, the picks that they got versus the ones they gave up. But like the line of thinking, like the overarching thought process that went behind this or what you're trying to do. It's not even like, oh, we're planning for a Nikola Jokic pursuit 6 years down the line or something ridiculous like that. It's like, it's Jalen Brunson. Like Jalen Brunson's a really good player. He's not someone that should dictate like this much of how your team is operating.
Right. Yeah. I mean, especially like if the cost to get 11, like to, OKC gave up 3 for future firsts for the 11 pick. Couldn't they have gotten more for 13 than just dumping Kemba's contract and getting a Milwaukee pick that's probably going to be in the 20s?
Yeah. Well, so
like, the value is off.
They also gave up too. So that's so weird. Not a detrimental move on its face, but more of, I do think it was not great value. And look, if that was the cost to dump Kemba Walker, I'm just not dumping Kemba Walker. That's a lot of the refrains here. It's like, well, if they gave that up, do you really think they just took the worst deal? And one, it happened on draft night under pressure. Like there's a chance there could have been other moves out there, like the
Yeah.
Warriors with Andre Iguodala, where that felt like a very like impulsive decision to send him to Memphis with that 2024 pick. I mean, if there weren't, like, hey, here's a novel concept. You didn't need to dump Kemba Walker then.
Right. Or I mean, like OKC has 20 million in cap space, burning a hole in their pockets that expires on June 30th. Like you're telling me if you have some good intel, like on June 29th, that you're in line for Brunson at that point, or Kyrie, God forbid, like you wouldn't be able to attach a future first to Alec Burks or Nerlens Noel, or I mean, probably not Kemba because they went down that
Maybe
road.
leave
But
the Thunder because they wouldn't be able to reacquire him for, but
yeah,
it would be well within the window. Yeah, you're right. So,
but
well,
Burks
it
and
would have
Noel
been,
they could take.
yeah, for sure. The next team,
Oh boy,
you just want to, so we'll go to the Toronto Raptors, but
perfect. Yeah.
The Philadelphia 76ers, key free agents for them. Not sure if you've heard of this guy, James Harden. There's also, he has a player option, Paul Millsap and DeAndre Jordan.
The key to their summer.
Shake Milton also has a $1.9 million team option. Isaiah Joe and Paul Reed are on non-guaranteed deals, and Charles Bassey has a $74K guarantee. Notable extension candidates. I threw this one in there for you. Tobias Harris. It is the 3rd anniversary of his 5-year deal. So he is extension eligible, BT, just in case you needed to know.
Yep.
No notable trade exceptions. Their best spending tool, and this is like the topic that dictates everything. I have it as the mini MLE. You've written extensively about how they could try to open up the non-taxpayer MLE and the biannual, but it looks like after that trade for Melton, they decided we'll use the mini MLE, and he's probably better than any player that we would have gotten with the biannual or the non-taxpayer to begin with. And maybe they just didn't want to hard cap themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they've sent some pretty clear messaging out over the past week that they are not going to salary dump just to get access to the MLE. So they're not going to like give Matisse Thybulle away for free. The Melton trade makes it more likely that they're going to have the mini one. The only 2 realistic pathways that I can see that for them to get the full one, James Harden opts out and resigns for less money, but it would have to be like substantially less money now.
I think you said what was the number? 36?
Yeah, it's like if they want to do a minimum deal for the 15th roster spot, like so assuming they're gonna use the full non-taxpayer on someone and then use a minimum exception for the 15th spot, yeah, it's like he has to take a $10-ish million pay cut.
A lot.
Yeah. Like before all of this, he could have, like, heading into draft night, he could have taken 42.7 and they would have had access. Now it's just a tougher sell, I think. The other way is trading Tobias Harris for someone who earns slightly less money. So Gordon Hayward's the guy I've got circled, especially if the Hornets lose Miles Bridges in restricted free agency. Do they just do Tobias for Hayward? And like, I honestly don't know which team would have to include anything else, or if either team would. Like, I think both teams would want the other one to send something else, and they would ultimately realize, like, actually, this is a pretty fair value trade as is, so we'll just pull it off.
Yeah, and look, as we talked about this the night before we recorded this, there's probably just more value in not having to be so beholden to the hard cap to where you're literally just working like with such finite room under it if you were trying to use that non-taxpayer. And who are you getting for it? Like D'Anthony Melton is probably better than anyone you're actually going to sign at this point with the non-taxpayer mid-level.
Yeah, like if they do this Harris for Hayward trade, and they've been linked with PJ Tucker a lot. Like, is Hayward and PJ Tucker better than Harris and whoever they get with the taxpayer mid-level? Impossible to say now without knowing who they get, but I would think no, because Harris is like the one two-way wing on their roster, and that is really stretching the definition of two-way wing.
Which is, I was going to ask you, so like, what are the needs of this team? And it feels like they have like more than a team in this position probably should. D'Anthony Melton definitely helps for sure. Yeah, that was a great pickup.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've been saying all offseason, wing. That's the number one need by far, especially if you're going against Tatum and Jimmy Butler and maybe Kevin Durant in the playoffs. And I mean, Giannis is his own beast, but Chris Middleton in the playoffs as well. So ideally, a two-way wing. I think because, like, assuming they don't make any major trades, like you have Maxey, Harden, Harris, Embiid, all of whom can go off for 20, or in Embiid and Harden's case, and even Maxey's, go off for 30 on any given night. So you don't need another high volume scorer. Like, I would really just look for like a low usage 3-and-D guy. So Daniel House is one of the main guys, main realistic targets that I had in mind for them. We went over a bunch of the other candidates when we were talking about Boston, but like either the Martins, Gary Harris would be interesting. Otto Porter would be interesting. Torian Prince, if he's willing to go for the mini one. TJ Warren's probably the one where like that's the highest risk, but also the highest upside of anyone in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I do wonder, the Sixers, because Danny Green got hurt and then they traded him for Melton. Like right now, you're penciling in Matisse Thybulle as their starting three, but I don't think that spot is set in stone by any means. So like, because so many contenders are limited to the mini MLE, the Sixers can at least say, hey, like we have a real chance for playing time here. Like you have the opportunity to start here, whereas like you're not getting that in Boston or Denver or wherever. So that might help them. Or Michael Rubin can just ship some Fanatics money under the table now, I guess.
Yeah, it's such a. Would you do? I don't know if he's like, I don't know if he's 3 enough, and then I also don't know if he's a big enough. But like, what if Bruce Brown was willing to take the mini?
Yeah. I had him on my non-taxpayer list.
Oh, really? So you think he gets? I know he shot the 3 well last year, but Brooklyn almost seemed like uniquely able to use him on offense, where like he was doing other stuff too, hanging around the dunker spot and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, especially given his relationship playing with Harden before, he'd be a really interesting candidate, and just weakening Brooklyn. That's certainly something that can help because you're going to be competing with them in theory for a playoff spot next year. Kyle Anderson was another one, but I think he's probably too expensive, and like the fit is just so weird, and I don't trust Doc to figure it out at all. But it could work, I think.
I mean, he would help them defensively a lot, and he gives them like a different type of playmaker.
And rebounding, I think he would help too. Like their rebounding was garbage last year.
Which is also why like they need to. Well, this isn't also why, because they did hit on their backup 5 signing. Now they need to hit on it again at the minimum, and that's like another need. Like I would love, you don't spend one, he'll cost more, but like you can't. I don't think you could justify like if Chris Boucher said, "Hey, I'll take the mini Emily to come there." I mean, I might do it anyway because he could play with Embiid technically, but like that would be a home run. But you also don't want to use your best spending tool on a position that your best player mans.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like I mean, again, this is coming from Daryl, so I don't know if Doc is going to buy into it, but Daryl on draft night made it sound like Doc was impressed with what Paul Reed gave them late in the season. He's optimistic about Charles Bassey, who was a rookie last year, a second-round pick. So it sounds like they might just let those two guys battle it out for the backup 5 job. He said there's going to be like a pretty high bar if they do get a minimum center, because like roster spots are also a problem for them. They've got, assuming Harden opts in or whatever happens with Harden, if he comes back, which I think he will, they're at 13 already. So like if you spend one, you've got Reed and Bassey, like if you sign another min guy, you've got 4 centers, or if you consider Reed a 4, he can probably play either spot, but like that leaves room for one wing. And you've got then your wing rotation, or wing/forward rotation, is Harris, Thybulle, Korkmaz, I guess. Like Isaiah Joe was not going to play. George Niang was, good in the regular season, struggled in the playoffs. Like I would personally advocate using those 2 final roster spots on 2 wings. And I wonder, like House, I have circled as the guy who I think they might be able to get for cheaper than other teams, because he played with Harden in Houston. Morey's got a relationship with him as well. So maybe they can get him in on a min deal, or maybe they can split the mini MLE between him and one other guy. I don't know, but that would be that's how I would do it if I, without knowing like who is willing to take what. That would be my mindset going into the offseason.
I was wondering, and I'm not wondering as much anymore. But he said he wanted to play with Joel Embiid if Nick Batum would work
Yeah,
for them,
yeah, yeah.
because the Clippers have so many wings. I was like, maybe they don't want to pay him, but it kind of seems like they don't care about the tax. Which, if that's true, I
Right,
feel like we always are quick to give teams credit for not caring until they all of a sudden start to care. Uh,
right.
Batum would be fantastic if they could get Tucker. That is like he opts out with the intention of getting the full the bigger MLE like
Yeah.
that, or the 120% raise from Miami, which comes pretty close to that. Like you're not taking 6.4 million from the Sixers. Another name I thought about, and they could move him around a lot. Juan Toscano Anderson would be really good here.
Ooh, that's interesting. I actually had not thought about him. Batum was on my list of taxpayer and Amir Coffey as well for the
Yes,
same.
I think this will be the 14th team that we've done as we're recording this. I have suggested Amir Coffey for no fewer than 10 of those teams.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he just, again, like, they don't need another high volume scorer. They need someone to stand in the corner, knock down threes, be switchable on defense. I think he can do all of those things.
And
And,
if we're going to pillage the Warriors, Damian Lee would make, I know he wasn't playing for
yeah.
them, but he'd probably play for the Sixers.
Yeah. I mean, looking at teams that are already well over the tax line and have a number of notable free agents is a safe bet. Like, if they do go for a backup center, Isaiah Hartenstein would be one of the guys I'd go after. But
So
I,
good.
yeah,
So
I
good.
didn't name him in my targets because I don't want them to spend money on a backup center. But if they did, that would probably be the guy I'd try to get.
So how do you think well, before I get to James Harden,
Yeah.
do you think the D'Anthony Melton trade now, it felt like they could have been, I know they were linked to like Windhorst sort of mentioned that like, oh, they're dreaming of getting a third star. This team
Mm-hmm.
really just isn't set up to make a big trade.
No. Yeah.
And so I would think Melton is like the biggest move that they make this summer, right? Like that ends up being like the biggest get for them. James Harden notwithstanding.
Right. I don't want to like rule out anything because I'm sure Daryl is coming up with a
I just
bunch of
can't
different
imagine trading
scenarios.
Tyrese Maxey on his rookie scale. I can't imagine
Yeah.
doing it.
I wouldn't be thrilled about it. It would have to be for an absolute surefire superstar. And I'm not putting, like, Kyrie named the Sixers as one of his teams of interest. I do not think they reciprocate that
Which,
feeling.
like, that was hysterical. James Harden's on the
Right.
Sixers.
James Harden literally requested a trade to get away from you. I don't think they're going to want to. Yeah. So I think Melton and then whoever they sign with the MLE will probably be their two big splashes.
How do you expect, what would be your guess on how the James Harden contract is? Because he'll be back in Philly, but
Right.
it does feel like there's still a bunch of different scenarios still in play and that there's not this huge feel for what he's necessarily going to do.
Yeah, I mean, our colleague Jake Fisher has reported he is likely to opt in and take a short-term extension, and then I think either Woj or Windhorst has since echoed that reporting. So they are more plugged in than I am, so I will absolutely believe them. I think Harden would probably like a full max extension for, I'm sure he would like all 5 years. That's not going to happen. I'm sure he is going to be pushing for a max extension of 2 years. I'm sure the Sixers are going to be trying to get a little bit less than that. None of that impacts what they can do this offseason. So Wednesday, we're going to know either way what they're able to do. Like a couple weeks ago, I wrote that him opting out and re-signing for less would be their best play because at that point it was easier to get access to the non-tax mid-level and the biannual exception. Now, because he would have to take such a big discount to get there, I don't think it's going to happen. And frankly, I mean, Derek Bodner of the Daily Six newsletter, I think, was the first to point this out. It's a really smart point. Again, summer 2025 is coming. So if he signs a 3-year extension, he comes off the books right then. The only guy they currently have signed through then is Joel Embiid. Knock on wood, Tyrese
Which
Maxey will
Western
join
Conference
him.
team would Joel Embiid be playing for in
I hate
2025?
you. I hate you. But like if Maxey, I'm assuming he's going to get a max extension next offseason or something close to it. But they could have. I mean, we'll see what they do in the ensuing 3 years. It's it's too early to be saying like, oh, they've got like $90 million in cap space, but like they could set themselves up to have a third max slot right when that summer happens if Harden does do this 3-year deal. So I'd rather pay him more over 3 years than slightly less over 4, unless he really did take a big enough discount to go full non-tax mid-level and full biannual exception.
Yeah, and look, there might be the fact that they're not set up to make a big trade anymore. If you could cut salary another way to open up both, like if it's the exchanging Tobias for a cheaper player or players, however that works out, the more that I thought about it, the more I might go that route. I guess you, especially Morey of all people, doesn't want to go the never say never direction, to where if some opportunity opens up in the middle of the season. And I know that you might want to make some like middle of the season, like signings or 10 days or whatever. But I'm also just sort of like, you're not set up to like make this mega blockbuster anyway. Do you really need to care about having such a thin line of breathing room beneath the hard cap?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it would be like to convert one of their two-way guys to a rest of season contract. But I'm with you. Like they're pretty locked into this core. Like they just do not have. They've got these 3 gigantic salaries, and then Melton is right now their 4th highest paid player at 8.25 million. So like, unlike the Knicks, who have a ton of these mid-tier tradable salaries, the Sixers have nothing. Like it's very difficult to cobble together a trade. Danny Green was their one trade chip, and they made good on it. But now it's like, even if you cobble together Korkmaz and Thibault, that's still only $9.4 million in salary. So you can't even get. They were linked to Eric Gordon leading up to the draft. It's like, good luck figuring out an Eric Gordon trade right now that doesn't involve Tobias Harris. You'd have to include basically everyone else on the roster.
What would you do if James Harden signed like a 5-year, $175 million deal?
I mean, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, because at that point you probably do have
That's
access
what
to
I would
both.
like, but you just have James Harden for 5 years at like 35 million a pop, basically.
Yeah. You would hope if he does that, you would at least try to structure it in a way you get the full non-tax and biannual this year. You probably have it go up in at least the next year, and then have it decline after that. So you're at least going to have, hopefully the salary is in line with his production, and also it'll be cheaper as this cap boom happens in 25. And if you're trying to get off of him and his body isn't totally broken by then, maybe you'll be able to do that.
That about wraps us up on the Sixers, which brings us to our last team, Toronto Raptors. Key free agents include Chris Boucher, unrestricted full bird, Yuta Watanabe, who would actually be a good fit for the Sixers. They probably want someone who's like played more, though, I'm assuming. Thaddeus Young is also a free agent, as is Isak Bonga. He's a non-guaranteed deal. Other notable non-guarantees, Delano Banton. He has $150K guaranteed on his $1.6 million salary until July 4th. Armani Brooks is $50K guaranteed of his $1.8 million salary. And then $250K will guarantee on August 1st. Notable extension candidates, both Siakam and Fred VanVleet are extension eligible this summer. That's interesting. And notable trade exceptions, they have 3.1 left over from the Kyle Lowry trade that expires on July 6th, and they have 5.3 million from the Goran Dragic trade, which expires February 10th. Their best spending tool should be the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, unless they do something to clear space, which they can't. They're also, they're a thoroughly uninteresting trade team, just because it has to be a megastar because of who they would need to trade. It would have, like, even the Rudy Gobert structure is like, unless it's literally OG Anunoby and the rest of your roster that isn't Gary Trent Jr., Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, and Fred VanVleet, like you would have to trade Gary Trent Jr. and OG Anunoby almost in the same trade. So what do you have as just their biggest needs? What are you like looking to see from them going into the free agency?
I think they don't have enough 6'9" players. That's really, I think.
I mean, the way Bobby Webster was talking, they don't think that they do.
I know. It's just awesome. I know I'm like saying that half facetiously, but I also think they genuinely might just want to go a full team of guys between 6'7" and 6'9" who can dribble, shoot, and pass and defend. And maybe that's just the vision. I think when they ran into Embiid in the playoffs and they didn't have anyone who could guard him unless they broke his face with an elbow in garbage time, that at least suggested that they could use a traditional center, or at least someone who can soak up minutes against bigger guys. But at the same time, like, how many of the other teams that you're going to go against in the East, other than Philly, has that like low post behemoth? Like Brooklyn, even if they bring back Nick Claxton, you're not worried about that. Robert Williams, sure, but that's not the way he's going to score baskets. He's going to be a lob threat and he'll be a like offensive rebound putback type of guy, but he's not going to create his own off of post ups. Brooke Lopez is just going to bomb away from three. He's not going to post up a ton. Bam Adebayo, same deal. So like, I agree they could use one, but I feel like their need for one is overblown. And
thank you. I just felt like I was on my own a little bit. I don't really know how Raptors fans feel about it, but I hate Rudy Gobert's fit there.
Yeah.
It doesn't need that level of center.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And especially, as you said, given the caliber of talent they would have to give up. Like, if they're giving up OG and Trent, I wouldn't, like, I'd almost be asking Utah to send more back, or at least send a pick back. And, like, Utah would definitely go tell you to F yourself. But, like, Rudy on that contract, I get the value that he brings. And I'm not saying that he is a bad player or that he is overpaid. It's just, it is tough to build around someone on that type of a contract in general, unless they are a top 5 NBA player. And even the most ardent Utah Jazz fan, I hope, would not argue that he is that caliber of a player. So
the Utah Jazz fans in our Discord and who listen to this podcast and comment on YouTube or whatever, they seem pretty like, I think some of them want to trade Donovan Mitchell instead of Rudy.
Yeah.
Which, look, that's fine too. Rudy Gobert is probably the more, certainly in the regular season, you can make the case he's the more valuable player. It's just Donovan Mitchell is the prototype of player you would rebuild around, not just because of his point of attack offense. He's also just, he's younger.
Right. I think that is coming more from like, we know who the source of all of this discord is coming from. And even if they trade Gobert, are we just like biding time until
Donovan Mitchell was shocked to hear that Quinn Snyder was fired. I said this I can't remember if it was Grant or Adam on a podcast. Like, I'm not plugged in, and we all just knew based off people who were plugged in, just hearing it in the ether that he was leaving. Donovan Mitchell probably knew a little bit more than we did, you would think.
Yeah. Yeah, like I have a feeling even if they trade Gobert this offseason, like he asks out in the next year or two anyway. So I think they just might want to rip the Band-Aid off. You're definitely getting more for Mitchell in a trade this summer anyway than you are for Gobert. So that is all beside the point. But yeah, I would not. I'm cool with like Precious Achiuwa has showed something interesting this year in Toronto, and like if you've got all these 6'9" guys, you have Siakam, Barnes, Achiuwa. If you re-sign Chris Boucher.
And you should. Chris Boucher forever. Every team should sign Chris Boucher.
Yeah, hopefully Nick Nurse will stop hating him at some point. They've got OG's 6'7", has got a huge wingspan. Like they've got plenty of length. It's you don't need to break the bank on a center. Maybe
would you be okay? Man, I mean, Andre Jones finally got to practice with Joel Embiid. Now he's going to be on the receiving end of like Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
I had thought about like, and these don't fit. First of all, the list of bigs who might give you a shot against Joel Embiid is just so tiny.
Right.
Like, I would ultimately be okay with the bigs that I'm about to name for the most part if they went and spent their non-taxpayers mid-level on that big. I didn't want to see them make an actual trade for one when you have like, Pascal Siakam's not incapable of playing the 5. Like when you have your lineups that are positionless or you've had OG defend certain centers, maybe that's what you're looking to get away from. Isaiah Hartenstein would be great here. Maybe not as mobile as they're used to, but he's a really good rim protector. I also would really like, I don't know if this gets him out of Brooklyn, but Nick Claxton here, he fits like there. He's all over the place. Maybe you want someone with a little bit more girth to them. And the other name, I'm sure it's been thrown out there, but Kevon Looney would make a lot of sense for them too. If you trust Siakam and assuming Boucher comes back to sort of space the floor as his other front court partner, I can't remember, but I was seeing someone talking about like, well, Kevon Looney's not switchable enough. And I was like, there are a lot of things that Kevon Looney is not switchable enough. Is not one of them. No. So
did we watch the same finals?
Right. So those would be like centers. I would be okay with them. I don't want to say burning, but using I don't know why I'm like, they're not setting money on fire. Those are really good players.
Spending BM Elion.
But I would also really like to see them get just like, I mean, if they can create in the half court, that's a bonus because their bench is kind of thin. They ran their starters around this year. I'd like to see another half-court creator. I thought this would be a sneaky good Victor Oladipo team if he's a
Ooh,
non-taxpayer MLE guy.
that would be, yeah. Yeah, I mean, for Looney, because I think the Warriors have bird rights on him, if I'm
Yeah, they
remembering correctly.
right. This is like we're about to see how much the Warriors don't care about the tax. Like
Right,
right, because
right.
they have early bird rights on GP2, so they could pay him basically more than anyone as well.
Yeah, and then just use the taxpayer on auto. Because, like, I would think 10.3 million. With their current luxury tax bill, it's not just 10.3 million, but like,
Like
it's
it's
not
like
like,
1 billion, yeah, but
yeah, right. But it's not like the Raptors are going to pay him like 25 million. If that were the case, or if like the Knicks are going to swoop in and pay him 25 million.
it could be a
Uh,
matter of he's going to wind up having the non-taxpayer mid-level market, and are they willing to? He has never been paid. So can
yeah.
you give him something? Like there should be no hometown discounts on Kevon Looney's part.
Right. That's fair. I mean, I wonder again. I'm going to bring up Mo Bamba, but like that seems like it could be a pretty
Well,
interesting fit at Toronto.
that was going to be my next thing. Was I really thought they just need shooting, like they
Yeah,
just needed Mo Bamba shot the ball well. There aren't a lot of. The more you look, like there are not a lot of pure shooters on the market, and then some of the ones that you kind of where I was looking at either shooting or someone who could give you point guard reps, like they just don't fit the Raptors mold. Like a Gary Harris, a Tyus Jones, not the best shooter, but like as another sort of guy to manage your offense, like those don't seem like Toronto Raptors players. They very much admitted that they have a type. And
yeah,
so I could see this going in a bunch of different directions. I could also see them not signing a center at all. You have Thaddeus Young, you have Chris Boucher, roll it back that way, I suppose. I just like maybe they'll make a minimum signing, but I could see their non-taxpayers mid-level going to something other than a big for sure.
yeah. I could too. I mean, because they could take a cheap flyer on like a Derek Jones Jr. maybe, or
That's a good one.
I mean Montrezl Harrell. Well, now maybe he goes for less because he's facing some legal issues. Thomas
Which he
Bryant,
should not be. Like it was weak.
but 3 pounds. 3 pounds is a lot.
Look, you can go to BJ's and buy all this stuff in bulk.
For
His
three
cannabis could be the
pounds?
same thing. Whatever. It's
That
was it actively hurting anybody at the time? I mean, we don't need to
I,
litigate the Montrezl
yeah.
Harrell case,
No,
but
no, no, no. I
I
was
mean,
just saying
3 pounds is an
that's a lot.
excessive amount. But
That yeah, that is
look, if he
unless you
needs
are
to,
buying
look,
it for
I
your
don't
whole
think it,
block.
right. Look, if he needs to
Like,
sell it because he didn't get like the max contract he was looking for, like I understand
right.
that. You
Yeah.
gotta
It's just his side hustle. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know what Thomas Bryant gets if there's a huge market for him, but like maybe you can get him on a min deal or like
to that point, they are a team that can afford to go offense first in basically whatever they do.
yeah. Yeah, I mean they are the good thing for them is that they are one of the few teams where wing is not a huge need for them. So while everyone else is fighting over the same like 6 mid-level targets, they might be able to swoop in and steal someone like a Bryn Forbes, maybe.
Ooh, okay.
Uh,
Um, there, I thought about what was the other. Oh, so one of the things I thought about, I don't know if the non-taxpayers mid level is enough to get him out of San Antonio, but Lonnie
Lonnie
Walker
Walker, yeah.
would be interesting here. Like someone they could talk. All right, he's like big enough to where we can move him around, but like he is someone who is comfortable like getting shots up and putting the ball on the floor.
Right.
And
Yeah, I mean
what
Malik
would
Monk too. I'll name him as like if you're looking for just a pure shooter again.
I want like would they have the stomach and how much does he cost? Like Joe Ingles, when's he coming back next year?
Oh yeah.
He could slow it down for them a little bit on offense, and he shoots well. Obviously, didn't have the greatest season this past year, but still.
Right. Yeah, I mean I think well, I mean, I guess all their biggest concern will be the playoffs. Like so as long as he's back by then, but you mentioned the bench is pretty thin. So I
That's a
think
good point.
one of the like, you want to round out the roster and like make sure you're not playing Fred VanVleet 38 minutes in late November so they get to the playoffs and aren't totally gassed already.
Who do you think, to wrap up here, is more likely to sign an extension, Fred VanVleet or Pascal Siakam?
Ooh. Uh Siakam's eligible for a much bigger extension than VanVleet, right?
Yeah, because he makes a lot more money. So like
Yeah.
Fred VanVleet,
So
20% off his number, I actually think is probably fair market value for Fred VanVleet, but he's got to be looking at like he has his player option next year, and like, there'll be teams that there'll be a team that would probably max Fred VanVleet next year. So my guess is that he of the two would be less likely to accept an extension. But if you're going to extend
yeah.
Siakam off of his, what is he making? He's at 35.4 next year and 37.9 in 2023, 2024.
Yeah, so that's probably, I mean, it might not be his full max, but that will be close enough that there actually might be some, and again, frankly, like not knowing what the new CBA is going to bring and not knowing
Right.
just how high the cap is going to spike in 25. Like, I think if you've got guys who you feel comfortable building around for the next 4 or 5 years, you should try to lock them in as soon as humanly possible. Because I think most agents are going to say, like, let's wait a year or two. Like, we've got a big payday coming around the corner.
Yeah, and that's why I'm almost positive, because Van Fleet's probably in for more money even before that windfall. Siakam is the one I would look at, and I'd be comfortable extending feel like the number he could wind up at from here is probably actually one that might be sort of mutually okay, like that middle ground.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, again, like it's going to kick in 24, 25. So most of the extension will be under the new TV deal cap numbers. So whatever the cap rises to, like even if Siakam's making 40 plus million, if the cap's at 170,
Right.
He's all of a sudden making less than 25% of the cap, even though is he a 35% guy after, or is he still 30?
I think he might still be 30. I know he's got to still be 30. I'll check really quick.
Right? Yeah, because he was 2016. Yeah. So he'd be, so maybe, does he wait 2 years to become a 35% guy? Is the other question.
Well, but he would have to sign you could do a shorter extension.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe that's the play. Yeah.
And that would work out for both sides then too. Because if he's in a position to get the full boat when his contract's up, then great. That means he's played like fantastically for you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, like I'm going to write about this at some point because I think it is a point worth hammering home like over our heads for the next 3 years.
Yeah, extensions normally aren't worth it to begin with based off the raises you could get, but there are still a few. I think Siakam's is one, even with the TV money coming around. That's one that I just find interesting. And if he was willing to sign out for longer, it works out better for Toronto. Anything else on this team? Anyone else that you thought of for them as a free agent? One of the free agents I didn't want to mention, I was afraid to kick around his idea. I deleted it from my note. Oh, I thought about Jalen Smith for this team too. I was like, they want another big. He shot well in Indiana. Like, let's give it a go. They like developmental project. They dance to the beat of their own drum. But
yeah, because Indiana is limited. They can only offer him like not a ton of money, right?
I assumed he would be back there anyway, because I don't know who's barreling down the door to sign Jalen Smith. But I feel like I shouldn't be allowed to talk about the Raptors because I just assume that they'll try anything. Is basically where I'm at this point.
I know. Imagine having a coach and executive, a lot of teams have, but a coach who is willing to play young players and experiment during the regular season. It is a novel concept for you and I, especially.
Bryan, are you able to tell everybody where they can find you and the great work that you do?
Yes. Well, thank you again for having me. You can find me on Twitter at @Toporek. That's Toporek. You can find my stuff on Forbes Sports. Going to have a lot about the Sixers. I've written a ton about James Harden's contract and blah, blah, blah. I've got non-taxpayer targets, and I'll have taxpayer targets for them. And I'll have some like general, once we hit a lull, I've got some general new CBA thoughts to unload in August. So stay tuned there.
I will be pestering you to come on and talk about those. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I mean, because again, like the Supermax has got to change. I think. I wonder if some of these extension rules change. I'm just curious how all this plays out over the next year or two. And you can find my podcast, the NBA Podcast, wherever podcasts are found.
Yes, check that out. Him and Mort are great. Thank you so much for coming on, especially because we've been staying to about 10 to 12 minutes a team, and you and I did naturally, I think it was 20 minutes a team at this point, but this was great. Thank you so much, and we will talk to you soon, BT. Until next time, we leave everyone with the shout out to the one, the only, the legendary, the conference finalist that could be a free agent, but he won't be because his team is going to be smart enough to guarantee his salary, Frank Ntilikina.